சும்மா பண்ணிட்டாரா?
இதுல போட்டாலே போதும், அதுல போட்டுருவாங்க எல்லாரும். அவர் ஜாயின் பண்ணணும், இதுல போடுறேன் நான். அவரோட எனக்கு வந்து இதுல வர மாட்டேங்குது.
ஜாயின் பண்ணிட்டேன் ஜெயஸ்.
Are you able to hear me? Okay, finally. Good.
Vishnu, you're free for a minute? I want to share my screen. Can you help?
So it's your person now, right? You can come in. And then you should say
Your entire screen.
entire screen.
Click that.
This one?
Yeah, click.
And share. Unshare your screen.
Oh, 1 second. Can I?
Yeah, go in. You can come in and check.
Can you rejoin if you leave?
Yeah.
Huh?
No, I can't rejoin. So yeah, quit now. That's fine. We'll rejoin.
Okay. Just not be able to record content.
Hmm.
Or is there any other way you can join? Through some other browser?
No, they have a Google meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have a choice. Yeah.
Sir, is my voice audible to you?
Yes, ma'am.
No, I think to sir, it's not audible. Okay, okay. Sir, good morning. Is my voice audible to you? Sir, I think you have to unmute.
Yeah, sorry, but sorry.
Yes, yes, sir. Just 1-2 minutes, sir. Let students join.
Sure, no problem. I just want to make sure that the screen is visible. Is the screen
Yeah,
visible?
yeah. Screen is visible now. It's visible now.
I am unfortunately not able to see it. So,
No, I can get your screen.
Professor Sudha, I think you can go ahead.
Shall I start? A pleasant morning to all. Coming together is beginning. Staying together is progress. Working together is success. We are virtually connected here to attend the webinar on problem solving and ideation workshop. Now to start the day, we request our beloved head of the department, Dr. A.R. Jaisudha, to deliver the welcome address and start the forum.
Very good morning to all connected here. My morning wishes to our honorable speaker, Mr. K. Chidambaran, Head Analytics Platform and Applications, LinkedIn, Bangalore, our respected CEO, our beloved Dean, and staff members of the Home Department and other departments, heads of other departments, and to all our student friends. Very good morning. Kindly permit me to talk about the session for a minute or two. Ideation is a creative process where designers generate ideas in sessions. It is one of the stages in design thinking process. Generally, participants produce as many ideas they can. Statement. It is actually an exciting stage in a design thinking process because during ideation, the aim is to generate a large quantity of ideas that the team can then filter, cut it down to the best or most innovative ones in order to inspire new and better design solutions and products. Happy in welcoming you all to this session on problem solving and ideation workshop. My pleasure in introducing our chief guest, speaker of the day. Mr. K. Chidambaran is currently the head of Analytics Platform and Applications at LinkedIn, Bangalore. He is into building strategy for data-first approach at LinkedIn. Getting data curated and ready for thousands of machine learning experiments, LinkedIn runs every year for insights, forces them to build adaptive systems. He was working for VP Engineering Bangalore as country head from January 2018 till August 2018. He played a key role in leading the Bangalore engineering teams. He had worked as advisor for Nextra Innovations Hyderabad from January 2015 to January 2018 and was member of the executive team responsible for product strategy. He had worked as Senior Director, Engineering and Country Head at the Taxu, Boston from December 2014 to Jan 2018, building and delivering cutting-edge products to solve business problems. He had worked as Director, Cloud Computing Big Data Analytics at Nokia from January 2011 to December 2014 and was responsible for seeding and building science and analytics. He was responsible for three core areas: core platform, data science and analytics, and visualization. He had worked as Director, Hadoop Engineering, Cloud Computing and User Data Analytics Group from October 2007 to Jan 2011 at Yahoo. He brought on board to seed and groom a high-performance team to solve a critical issue that Yahoo Search faced, the problem of scaling. Bachelor of Engineering in of Technology, Trichy. He completed his MBA at Penn State University, Pennsylvania in the field of information management. He has received 7 honors and awards and holds many licenses and certifications. Sir, our pride in having you with us this day as our speaker. My wholehearted thanks to you for accepting our invitation. Once again, I welcome every one of you here to the session. Thank you, everyone. Sir, over to you, sir. We'll start the session, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I will try to live up to that introduction. Everybody able to hear me? Just show a raise of hands.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
Good. Just give me some feedback, otherwise it's very hard to...
Yes, sure.
It's okay to interrupt me and talk and just give me some feedback. All right. So thank you again. As you can see, I've been moving around quite a bit, and the one thing that I care a lot about is staying relevant. And you stay relevant when you innovate. You stay young when you innovate. So this is an extremely timely seminar. Thank you, Dr. Sudha and the team, for giving me an opportunity to share some thoughts. We'll spend the next 45 minutes to an hour just going through some of the, I would say, the fundamentals of what innovation is. And we'll open up the next hour to questions. And I think we learn a lot. I will learn a lot by the questions that many of you, I'm sure, will ask. Some I may have answers, some I don't. I won't. But I'm sure I can find out and then in the process learn. So I look forward to a very interactive session. That's also what innovation really does to all of us, right? It makes us a lot more amenable to receiving new ideas. What I will try, I'm hearing some crosstalk.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can people please go on mute, because it becomes a little distracting if I hear crosstalk.
Yeah,
Please.
E&I Karpagam ma'am, kindly mute.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I have a headphone, so the sound gets extremely amplified. So
Okay.
sorry about that. If I don't have the headphone, then the computer's voice is not very clear. So I want to make sure I.
Okay, sir. Can you please find out whose mic is? Karpagam madam, E&I. Karpagam ma'am, can you please mute your mic?
Okay. So.
Karpagam madam, can you please mute your mic?
Okay, let us try, and if it gets distracting, we'll
Yes,
stop.
sir.
So yeah, the fun of technology. So what we'll do in the next 45 minutes is to go through some of the experiences I've had, some learnings that I've had. I will share with you some of what I have done from an innovation perspective. Not to say that that's the only way, but those are things that have worked for me, and I'll share them with you. And then once we get to that sweet spot of trying to understand what innovation is, we'll open up to a lot of questions. And hopefully, all of us will learn something out of this and be able to go back to our respective workplaces and continue on the journey of innovation, which is what keeps us all relevant. What I will try to do is to simplify it. Right? So let me begin with a good, interesting story to illustrate the concept. All of you are teachers, professors. There was a young girl in a class trying to draw something on a piece of paper when the teacher was taking an English class. So the teacher got very distracted, and she went to the student and asked the student, "Hey, little one, what are you trying to draw?" So she replied, "I'm trying to draw the picture of God." And then the teacher's question was, "But nobody has seen God." And the little young girl answered, "You will in a few minutes." Right? So I don't profess to be as intelligent as that little girl to be able to explain everything about innovation and make every one of you see innovation. But what I will try to do is to simplify it enough that we can actually take away some messages, some habits, some learnings that hopefully we all can put into practice in our respective workplaces. That will be the intent of this presentation. As we go through, it's okay to stop. It's okay to ask a question if it is not clear, and it doesn't have to wait for the Q&A session. We can make this very interactive, which is what we would have done anyway if we were all meeting face to face. So keep it, ask questions if it cannot wait. If the concept becomes a little unclear, don't allow me to move forward till I tell you what I meant, or till you agree what I meant, either way. All right, so let's begin. So what is innovation really? Any quick answers? What do people think innovation is? Any thoughts? Creating new, yeah, perfect. Okay. Ideas, yeah. What else? More answers. Implementation, exactly, yeah. Yeah. One more. New tech. All right. Good. Out of the box thinking. Yes. Yes. So let's new methods, new processes, new ideas, out of the box thinking. Why do we need innovation? So innovation is in this very interesting sweet spot of we do some things today, whether in our personal life, professional life, academic life, work life, whatever life we lead. There are a few things we do now, and there are a few things we want to do in the future. And innovation is a very beautiful sweet spot where you prepare for that future, right? So you will often hear terms, companies that don't innovate die. And this is the reason. They die because in some sense, they're not preparing for the future. So we innovate when we study. If you decide that you want to do engineering, like most of you are, or masters in computer applications or bachelors in computer applications, you plan a little bit and then try to align your work, your studies, your approach, your shortlisting of colleges to get that dream. All of those align to that future that you want to get to. So the key thing about innovation really is, in some sense, trying to find out what is it that we want the future to be, and taking some of the steps to be able to get into that future, right? So hold that thought in your mind, and then as we go through some of what it takes for us to achieve these, I'm sure you'll have questions, feel free to ask them, but keep this very important thought in mind, right? Anything that we want to achieve in the future requires an investment of energy now. So when I say now, let's say you're studying now in your 10th grade, 10th standard, and you want to become an engineer. In your 11th and 12th, you will put a lot of energy on trying to make sure you get a good seat, you get a seat in a good college where you can learn. That 2-year period is your innovation period, where you're trying to find out what's the best way for you. So you're doing something now, you want to get to a future, and innovation is that very interesting spot that allows us to achieve some of those ambitions or some of those goals, okay, that we want to achieve. So let's spend a minute or so trying to understand, I'm sorry about this. let's trying to understand just understand the terms. Right? So innovation always begins when there are a few problems to solve. So as some of you mentioned in the chat, coming up with new ideas, out of the box thinking, these are all, sorry, I'm seeing some Slack messages, raise the hand. So if I don't notice it, just stop me. So finding a solution to an ongoing issue is really the problem that is the problem solving process. And problem solving process involves two very important steps, the creativity and the ideation and the innovation. So several of you answered parts of it. The key to understanding and getting things done is two pieces. One, creativity, which is where all of these ideas flow in. So in some sense, creativity is like the front end. If you take a web server application, your front end, Chrome is your creativity, right? It's a front end. The innovation is the back end. So when you do innovation, you are really solving a lot of the problems that you're taking the focus away from how do I get done. So a problem does not get solved unless you have both pieces, a new idea for how to solve the problem and ways and methods by which we can actually get to a solution to the problem, which requires innovation, right? So this is the key piece, and several of us miss that. We tend to overemphasize or over pivot on creativity. Why? Because our reward systems are like that. Professor Sudha came up with 5 great ideas. We reward that. Professor so-and-so actually converted that idea into a working solution. We don't seem to think a lot about that, right? And that's why ideation, problem solving, all of that just seems to be over pivoted on creativity, which is why we create a lot of good ideas, but then we don't take some of those ideas into fruition. So when you want to solve a problem, you should have growth. You should have the ability to be able to create new ideas. You should be able to have the ability to be able to take one of those ideas, and we'll see how we do that. We take one of those ideas and take it to a point where you can get something done, because that's when you've really solved the problem. Okay, so here is how both of those pieces work together. Bear with me for this slide. This is a little bit of a context, and then we'll get into the meat of what, how, and all of that from the next slide. So when you get a lot of ideas into the table, you have what you call divergence of ideas, right? So for example, let's take a problem. I'll take something from my work life. We are trying to solve a problem of scale. We moved from 600 million users to let's say 900 million users. And how do we solve this problem of scale? There'll be lots of ideas. This is a problem we want to solve. So the phase one for that problem is, how do we solve this? So there'll be lots of ideas. Let's do this. Let's buy more machines. Let's change the software. Let's buy a better database system. Let's rewrite some of the core pieces of the algorithm so that it doesn't take so much time to compute. Let's optimize. Every one of these is the solution, possible solution, right? So what you do in the early phase of innovation is make sure that you allow all ideas to come in. There's no discussion about which idea is good, which idea is bad. It's a very creative phase of trying to put in ideas together. And then so that's called divergent thinking, right? So you can have topics as diverse as, let's drop this entire architecture and go do something new. And then you can have another approach that says, let's do pieces of these and then optimize. And then you have a third approach that says, our entire hardware infrastructure is bad. Every one of these are valid ideas, valid divergent ideas that we need to put in a bucket. And then what happens after you get those ideas is somebody takes responsibility to go through those ideas and make sure we have to focus on one of those ideas that we can take and move forward. And this is where I think most companies, most organizations, most individuals, even if you look at your own personal self, there are a lot of things you want to do, but unless you pick one and do, you're not going to be successful, right? My own example, when I was studying in 10th, 11th, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, medicine, engineering, law. And then I finally decided I wanted to do engineering because I like the working with the machines, tinkering with the tools and things like that. Until you get to that finality, you will not be able to focus your energy on getting things done, right? And nothing works until you get things done. Ideas are good, but if you don't get those ideas to a place where you can make it work, the ideas are not going to be valuable, not only for you, but for anybody else. So have this in mind. Ideation is a combined process of divergent thinking that allows us, as many of you rightly pointed out, get a lot of ideas together, out of the box thinking. How do I solve this? To picking up something and then saying, here is really what we want to do, right? And unless you do both, you have very divergent thinking, which allows you to collate ideas, and convergent thinking, which converges and picks one idea. You stop focusing on, hey, what is novel, new, anymore. You'll always have tons of ideas. At some point, you will say, okay, I've done enough of divergent thinking. Let me sit down. Let me do convergent thinking. Converge on one idea, pick it up, and run with it. Again, go back to your own examples. Several of you, I'm sure, would have many thoughts about what I want to do. Unless you decide what you want to do after your 12th grade, you're still going to be trying to struggle and figure out what should I do, and you'll probably do that for the rest of the 50 years of your life or 60 years of your life, right? So it's important for us to be able to get a very good balance. And I think this is where a lot of organizations fail. Either they pivot on getting a lot of ideas that they get and then throw, or they don't do enough of divergent thinking to get the right kind of ideas. They very quickly jump into a convergent method, which means you have really quickly analyzed, I want to be an engineer because my neighbor is an engineer. Bad choice. I want to be an engineer because I like playing with the machines. I like the concept of building things. Therefore, I want to be an engineer. That decision takes time because you have to look at all the possibilities. And companies sometimes don't have the time to do that. So we tend to converge way too quickly. And sometimes that just puts us in a very difficult position of trying to live with something that we are not happy about. Having said that, how do we now? So what prevents what happens in real life? Why are companies, or why are individuals, why are organizations, why are schools, why are colleges unable to innovate the way we should? Because there's plenty of things left to do, right? It's not a problem of not having enough problems. It's a problem of not putting enough time to solve some of those pressing problems. So why are we there? Whether it's an individual, whether it's a group of people, take something as simple as a group of people coming together to do something for the good of the neighborhood or for good of the community. Why are we not able to think beyond step one, step two? And the reason for that, there are three main reasons. One is uncertain outcomes. Second is misguided standards and conflict of interest. And we'll spend some time talking through all of this. And what I will do after that is spend a little bit of time trying to give you some models of how you can take back some of these problems, get a grip on those problems, and then adapt one of those models wherever you are, in your personal life, in your work life, in your community life, to try and get a handle on how do we innovate, how do we move forward. All right. So what is uncertain outcome? What do people think of uncertain outcomes? If I ask you a very open question, why should we be afraid of uncertain outcomes?
So can you please repeat the question? We're not getting the words.
Why should we be afraid of uncertain outcomes? Is this clear? Is the voice clear now?
Okay. Yes.
So why should we be afraid of uncertain outcomes? What is it in us that causes uncertain outcomes to cause us care or to prevent us from taking the things that we have to in order to move forward and innovate? Type a few answers on the chat just to get a feel for what people think. Any guesses? All right. So, uncertain outcomes. So anything uncertain actually disturbs us, right? As human beings, as individuals, whenever something is a little uncertain, it actually bothers us. And if you think deeply about how you're afraid of something, yeah, exactly, right? We are not sure what will happen to our efforts. So the fact that we don't know what the outcome is actually preventing us from even taking the first step to define what is it we should do in order to get to a desired place, right? So that's the crux. And organization, you'd be surprised how, I'm sure it happens in your schools, it happens in the places you work, how organizations are so pivoted towards, I need to know what I'm going to do. before I do something, right? So by definition, you have killed the goose before it laid the egg, right? By definition, innovation is a very uncertain process. You're trying to experiment, you're trying to do some random thinking. As somebody mentioned, you're doing out-of-the-box thinking, and none of these are predictable. So the first thing we all have to realize is that we have to be less afraid of uncertainty. And unless at an individual level, at an organization level, at a collective level, we can overcome our ability to not be afraid, our inability to be fearless when the outcome is uncertain, that's when we actually succeed. So take your own personal examples. Many of you wrote all of the engineering entrance exams, MCA entrance exams. If you all were worried and said, will I actually pass the exam? How many of you would actually go and take the exam? None, right? The fact that you went and took the exam, you are not sure about the outcome. You could pass, you could fail, you could get a great grade and get exactly the course you want. You could get a middle grade and find something that kind of satisfies what you want to do. The outcome was very uncertain, but you took the step of saying, let me go and write the exam. Let me go and attend the interview in the Hindustan College. Let me go and meet Dr. Sudha and her team and see if this is the place I want to study. So why do we have to not do anything very different at a collective level? Why are we afraid when we come as a group to do something that we normally tend to do as individuals? So keep that in mind as organizations, as groups of people, as teachers, as people who will lead the next generation of students towards doing something very innovative and interesting. This is something very, very important to keep in mind. So whatever role you play as a leader, as a teacher, it's your job, it's our job to make sure that we remove that impediment of the fear of uncertainty, right? Okay, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, and therefore I'm afraid. Unless that gets away from your mindset, when you say your team, every one of whom you're working with, you will get into a situation where you will not be able to allow people to think out of the box, as somebody mentioned. How does out of the box thinking come? When there is fearless attitude of, I'm going to say what I think is right. I'm not going to worry about whether my professor is going to say it's right or wrong. Right? All right. So let's spend a little time on the uncertain outcome. Right. So I work. I've spent a lot of my time on the corporate. I do teach, but I also spend most of my time spent on the corporate in the corporate world. So what do we do when we make decisions about projects? We minimize risk. We maximize reward. Right. Reward. So let's quickly. I don't know how many of you know Nassim Taleb. He was an investor and a banker a few years ago. He wrote some really good books and articles. This is from the investment mode. So let's take a look at just these two bars. On the left-hand side, you see very little risk, and therefore appropriate reward based on the risk. On the right side, you see a lot of risk, very high risk, and then if the risk pays off, you get very high reward, right? So nothing in the middle. This is a very interesting concept. So if you have to be clear in your mind about how you divide your resources in order to get, in order to maximize the return, because the outcome is uncertain, you do two things. You take a large enough bucket and so let's assume that you are completely new to the world of innovation and you're trying to innovate on a certain set of problems that you want to solve. One good way to do this is to begin by creating that culture of how do I innovate? And the left-hand side is very good. And we'll talk about a model for that in the next couple of slides. But for now, hold the thought in your mind that if you begin with, here are some of the ways by which we can innovate on some less risky places, less risky areas, you will begin to seed that culture. Right, and that's where you want to spend a lot of your initial effort on. That's how you divide your resources, and then you pick, say, 10% of the people, of the resources, of the money that you have, and put them into this more risk category. That way, of course, if you win, it's fantastic. But if you fail, you will still have learned something from it. And this is also something we'll talk about as in a third model where more risk is managed by and what we learn out of it and how do we use it going forward. Put your energy on these two ends of the spectrum, the barbell, right? A barbell is the exercise machine. So for those of you who go to the gym, there is this long rod on which there are two weights on the end, and there's always two weights, right? You don't ever lift a barbell with one weight. You just can't. So use the barbell example whenever you make someone. Don't try to be, let me also try to do this, right? So that's the middle strategy where there's very little risk, there is very little payoff. There is no win either way. So how would you do this in a financial world? You let's say you have 100 rupees you want to invest and you're a first-time investor. What would you do? You'll probably go for less risk, FDs, bonds, some kind of fixed maturity programs where the interest rate is guaranteed. You'll put maybe 80-90% of your money there. And they say, let me see how to play in the stock market. Let me take 10% of the money so that if I get the right hits, I actually make a lot of money. If I lose a little bit of money, I'm not going to lose my entire 100%. I'm going to lose only 10%. And hopefully I would have learned enough that when I take the next 10 out of this 90, I will be able to make the right decisions and come up and make a significant amount of gain, right? So that's a very crucial mindset to have as we begin to do innovation. And we should try to avoid I want to be here and I want to be there attitude, right? Then you don't learn anything. Neither will you get the courage to make bold bets about innovating, nor will you be able to keep a lot of people satisfied for a long time because you'll be doing the low risk things, which by definition will succeed, right? Because if there's low risk in something, then by definition it will succeed. And I think this is something that many organizations make a mistake on. They are very afraid of uncertain outcomes. And when they are afraid of uncertain outcomes, they take the safe path. And safe path is safe. You will get a safe result, but you will not get a result that will put you on the top. That will put you in a place where you are better prepared for the future than your friend if you're studying, than your neighboring village if you are a group of people who are in a village and doing different things, or your company or your school. For example, if Hindustan College has to do something really wonderful, they should take 10% bets and do things that most other colleges don't do. That's when Hindustan College will be known as a college for doing things beyond what is normal, right? But will you take all your 100% and put there? No, because that's an unproven strategy. We are trying to experiment and find out. So you take some amount of your resources, put it into that, and try and see how can I be different and how can I be better prepared for the future? How can I prepare my students for the future? That's innovation. Right? At the end of the day, in 3 years from now, if the college does something really wonderful, many people will hear about what's happening in the college, and many of us want to come and study there. Many of us want to get the experience of doing those really wonderful things. So whether it's an education institution, whether it's a corporate, whether it's your own personal life, the ability for all of us to be able to take what is important with less risk and balance it with what is very, very important for the future with high risk. That's an interesting balance. Some of you will be okay 80-20. Some of you will be very non-fearing of risk, so you can do 70-30, 70 safe, 30 risk. Some of us will be very, very conservative, so we will do 95 on the safe side, 5 on the risky side. The ratio really doesn't matter. The key thing is don't do in the middle. I will also walk, I will also run. No, you either walk or run, right? I will eat this and I will eat this. No. You pick one, right? So many of us have that dilemma about what to pick, what not to pick. What we'll do, we'll pick both, right? Oh, I'll take both. No, that's not going to help. So this is an important strategy to remember as you go in the path of innovation. And I'll share an example of how I arrived at this towards the end, where when I spent some time in Yahoo, this was something that actually killed us in the earlier days, and I'll talk about that if we have time. So this is another interesting slide. I just spend a minute reading about it, 30 seconds, and then we'll talk about. All right, it's a funny slide because how would you, if you're, so let's say Hindustan College decides to do something very innovative. And let's say, just for want of an example, let's say Dr. Sudha decides that she has to do something very innovative for the students. Now, those students who actually enroll in that program have to be measured differently, right? Because they're not going to be able to produce a product. They're not going to be able to write an exam and get marks. All of the existing things that have happened are no longer valid in this new space that we will try to do. However, in organizations, in colleges, what do? In our own personal life, we don't really understand this difference. Right? We use the existing set of standards to measure what we want to do afresh. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work. I mean, this is like this example of asking an elephant to climb a tree. No. So a lot of what we also do when we try to chart new territory is that we don't think about what are some of the ways by which we measure. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say I am an innovation manager and I lead a team of 4 people. Should I be measured on building a product? I don't think so. I should be measured on, have I done the right things? Have I followed the right, you know what, let's take a college example. Several of you, I'm sure, write papers. And papers are, as somebody pointed out of the box thinking, the source of great ideas that many of us at the corporate just take and implement, right? So all of the brain, the thinking, and all of this happens from the universities, from people like you. Take an example of how, if you're encouraging a few people to write papers, are you going to tell them that after you write these 5 papers, I'm going to give you an exam, and then depending on that, I will assess whether you are pass or fail? You can't. There's no way you can give an exam to somebody who's very creative and comes up with ideas and writes papers, because that's a bad way to measure. It's a bad standard to use to get somebody to do something very new. Yet, it's a funny example, but we do that in the corporate world. And I wish, so when you look at the papers, how do you grade? So let's say you're peer reviewing my paper. What do? You look at, am I relevant? Have I done the right experimentation? Have I set up the right platform to do it? Have I covered edge cases? Is it current? Have I cited, have I been able to corroborate something that's already existing? Does the paper meet the standards, ethics? You evaluate me on a lot of things. And then grade me, right? You're not giving me an exam, but you're grading me on things that in general are very different than what a student would be graded if he or she takes an exam. We should take that science into our corporate world, right? And then come up with an ability to be able to gauge and have a different set of standards for people who are creative and innovative. We don't do that. Any organization, for example, what does it do? Hey, this product came out. I sold 20 pieces of this product. You're great. Hey, this great idea came up. We didn't create a good product, but you know what? We learned a lot. Do any of us get rewarded for learning a lot? No, right? And so that's really where, as leaders, if you are setting up a culture of innovation, you have to be very cognizant of how you're going to measure innovation. You can't use the same set of standards. You can't use the same set of shoes that you were using when you were in the 5th standard, right? It just doesn't work. So the ability for us to be able to design systems that allow innovation to flourish is as important as just simply saying, hey, from tomorrow, all of you innovate. It just doesn't work. Right? And this is also something we do whether at an individual level. I mean, think about it. If you decide and say, I am going to do engineering and spend no time investing in your 11th and 12th standards to prepare for it, where will you land? Or worse yet, if you do prepare for medicine in 10th and 11th, and 11th and 12th, and expect to get an engineering stream, completely missed standards, right? Complete misguided standards. But I mean, it looks funny, but that's really what we do. We try to put everything into the same shoes. We try to measure everything the same way we've been used to measuring. And that's something that has changed. And here is the crux of everything. I mean, there's a significant conflict of interest, right? For example, when you innovate, you have to do, as we talked about, one area of difference, which is how do we measure. There are significant differences in terms of our ability to be able to get into innovative mode versus what we are doing. Just if you look at the graph on the left-hand side, the lower portion of it is the demand and supply. The upper portion of it is the profitability in the future. Okay? What do we tend to do? We tend to manage the demand and supply because that is today. It's a today's problem. Oh, I need this product to be out the door in 5 days. I'm going to take all my engineers and have them write this software. We tend to focus less on what is it that we want to do in the future. If you go to the right-hand side, we are working against time. So what happens when the pressure to deliver something that's as a product comes, we tend to take the people who have spent a lot of time on innovation, pull them into, hey, I have to deliver this product within a certain amount of time, because that's what we have been used to doing. And how do organizations survive? How do colleges survive? They try to produce people who can all get jobs, right? I mean, how are we measured? How has the college placed 100% of the people? No, people who innovate don't want to work in a company. They want to go into research. Do we measure that? For example, do we say, yeah, we placed 100% of the people, but 20% of them went to the corporate, 80% of them went to do research? We don't, right? So inherently, there are these very interesting conflicts that as people who want to either be practitioners of innovation or lead innovation teams, we should be cognizant about, and we should clearly define how we can make a group to be, how we can create a successful group. And if you don't resolve these differences within your own mind first, and then for the rest of the team, very easily you can take a team that's innovating and then pull them to something that's urgent instead of trying to wait for something that is important. So, right, so it's a trade-off. I have to deliver this product, pull everybody do this today. No, innovation is important. I'm investing on a product. If you look at the graph on the top, I'm looking into the future. I want to continue to grow, and for continuous growth, I need to be able to invest a certain set of people to do things that are not what we are doing today. Right? That's the shift. I'm not doing what I'm doing today. I have to do something different to be prepared for the future. But how many of us really have that discipline, right? I mean, we all borrow from the future. Our minds are wired like that. We take home loans. Why? Because we believe that we can borrow and we can pay it off. There's nothing wrong about it. It's just that you need to be cognizant. You need to be aware. I mean, you can borrow for a home loan, but you can't borrow for your living, right? And I think that's the difference we don't draw very often. So these are the three what I would call core areas we need to focus if you have to create an innovation mindset, right? So having said this, what is it that prevents all of us from getting to a place where problem solving becomes a habit? As many of you called out, part one is ideas, part two is execution. We all struggle when it comes to execution, right? Because execution is a lot more complicated. Things have to be done. There's a finish line. There's a very clear measure. But in the early stage, there's no measure. Oh, I can give you 10 ideas and then say, oh, I am the brightest. There's no way for you to measure whether my ideas are good or not. My ideas are only good if they can be implemented and there is some return on it. But what we don't do is we don't do the part two. We don't do the server side, right? We do the front end, the UI, the beauty side, and then we don't do the hard side, which is the back end. And that's why innovation fails. That's why we can't solve problems. We forget that problem solving is a two-part process. Generate the ideas, converge on an idea, pick that idea and execute it, right? As innovation is execution in some sense. And if you look at organizations, schools, colleges, we talked about the examples of how we are graded. For me, from an organization perspective, how are we built? We are built to keep things going, right? I want to win now. We need to be very efficient at what we do. We can't fail because if the LinkedIn site comes down, everybody, 600 million users will be impacted. So what do? We have repeatability, we have predictability. If something is going wrong, we need to quickly catch it. We need to be predictable. Now contrast that with innovation. It's complete opposite. Wants to win now? No. Innovation is for the long term. Demands efficiency? No, because by nature, experimentation is inefficient, right? Experimentation is absolutely inefficient. Experimentation is actually a waste disposal game. You will try 100 experiments before one succeeds. So by very nature of what innovation is, it's very, very different than what you as a college, we as an organization do on a day-to-day basis. We are geared towards keeping things running. We are not geared towards what is it we should do a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line. And the key differentiation is we want predictability when we run operations, but we want freshness and complete departure from the past, right? That's the 5% or the 10% bet that you take. You want to come up with a completely radically new idea. So for those of you who remember, the HDTV high definition television came sometime, I think, in early 90s. And the YouTube came, I think, 99 or something like that. So think about it. If YouTube had come 5 years earlier, how many of you think YouTube would have been successful? Very little chance of it being successful, right? Because the download speeds were pathetic. There were a lot of backend that had to improve. There were so many pieces of the puzzle that needed to be solved. We needed to come up with very important formats for video compression, right? So TV came sometime when, 55, 56, maybe 60. Until 93, we were using the same, until HDTV came up, we did not have any new formats. And the innovation that happened from 99 onwards or 95 onwards until today, including the new formats that are coming out that vastly compresses the video, is what made YouTube possible, right? That's very important from an organization, from an innovation execution perspective. We have to be able to depart from the past. But by very nature, we are not wired to do that, right? How many of us actually think about, hey, I have to write a paper? How many of us actually think about, I have to do something very different than what I've been doing yesterday? We are just not wired to do that. It's human comfort. And so when it is true at an individual level, when a group of us come together, it's going to be true even in a group. It's nobody's fault. It is just that our minds are wired into a level of comfort. And we carry that to the organizations, we carry that to the institutions, right? How many of us as teachers tell students, tomorrow you have to take the class and see how the student does, right? Not only will the student learn, but we also prepare the student to present well, to get up in the stage and not have stage fright. We don't do that. We always believe as teachers, we should stand at the stage, talk, the children have to listen, the students have to listen. So anytime you do something new, it's a big departure from the past. And our minds are not wired to do that well. Why? Because we are very afraid of uncertain outcomes. We are not sure of what the outcome is. We are afraid that if the student comes and doesn't talk properly, the rest of the class will joke about it. We will waste 45 minutes of lecture time by giving it to a student who was trying to come and talk and didn't succeed. But what you're forgetting is that you make the student do that 3 times, the student the 4th time is going to come and do a bang enough job. Do we have the ability to depart from the past practices and do something new? And so I hope you're seeing the inherent disconnect between individuals, groups of people, organizations, schools, all of that, to try and create a culture of innovation. And then we hear all of these very interesting things, right? Break the rules, don't follow. That's wrong. We need both. You need to be able to do what we are doing today to generate the money so that we can spend some money on innovation. So when I hear these very interesting notes about, hey, break all the rules if you have to innovate, that's the biggest nonsense you can take away, right? You can't break all the rules. Dr. Sudha, for example, cannot say, I'm going to stop taking classes and innovate from tomorrow. No, if she does that, where is she going to get the money to innovate? She needs to be able to get a set of students who can come in, get a degree, learn in the process, and use some of those students to do something very innovative, right? So when you hear break the rules to innovate, take it with a pinch of salt. You don't break the rules. You allow both to exist and go back to the barbell, right? So if you look at all of these slides, they are very interrelated. Go to the barbell and say, I am going to continue to do ongoing operations because that's what brings me money. I need to sell Android phones in order to get money to come up with the next Android version. If I don't sell Android phones, it doesn't matter how much innovative I am. I don't have the money to innovate, right? So you don't need to break the rules. What you have to do is adjust the rules so that you pivot where you have to spend the energy on, right? So quickly, we will talk about the 3 models, and this is a very important thing for all of you to take back. If anything, this is one slide that will help you in your journey. I have found this very useful, and I've used it in many places where I've worked. So very quickly, these are the 3 models. Incremental innovation is what we talked about a little bit earlier. We do it in small pieces. So a good example of incremental innovation is in Google. It used to happen when I was in Yahoo, where we were given some amount of time to do something interesting beyond our normal work. So I took up teaching. I went outside, I engaged with a lot of colleges. I still continue to teach. I'm the board of studies of colleges. I wanted to make sure that instead of complaining about our children or not, our students are not employable, what we do about it. That's incremental innovation, right? And in the process, Yahoo also benefited because a lot of these colleges, we were able to hire students with whom I worked and so on. So Google is another classic example. It gives 20% of the time to do, for every employee to go and do something beyond what they have to do for work, right? So they get paid 100% of the time they work, but the actual pay is 80%. The rest of the 20% is their free time. Now, the good news about it is it creates an innovation culture, but it doesn't come up with any breakthrough ideas, right? So if you look at it as a square as a square, what you have is the edge, the line on the squares is where innovation happens. It doesn't happen inside the square. You're taking the surface, you're giving incremental, it's valuable. You will get some benefit out of it, but it's not, whatever called, it's not drastic. It's not preparing into the future 2 years from now. But what it does is it allows engineers to do something very different. It attracts bright people. Right? When people hear about working for Google, they say, hey, you know what? I can try my own ideas. And that attracts a set of people who are bright. And in some sense, the ability for us to be able to do things beyond our normal 9 to 5 allows us to expand our mind. And the Google uses that, right? So it picks some people who are actually very innovative and puts them into a next model, which is, hey, look, here are some things we need to do, but you know what? I'm going to make it a little bit more formal. Here are the 5 instead of saying, go do what you want, I'm going to pick some of you who are really bright and who are able to come up with these great ideas and put you into a group and say, every day do this, make it a day-to-day event. So take 1 hour, here are the 5 problems I need to solve, go brainstorm about it, right? And the last one is the custom model. So this is what we did when we were doing Hadoop in Yahoo. We really had to separate the day-to-day and concentrate a core team on doing something that was extremely unique. And this is your 5% bet, right? These are the 5% chances that you take to do things that are completely off normal. What we were trying to solve was the problem of scale in Yahoo. We were using Oracle databases, which was extremely expensive to scale. So we needed to come up with a very rudimentary system that is cheap and easy to scale. That's how Hadoop was born, right? So we needed to do something very drastically different. And that is a custom opportunity. So if you look at innovation, all of these are innovations. Doing something on a daily basis that you like is innovation. Doing something on a daily basis that a company has a goal for, which is the day-to-day, which is a repeatable process, is innovation. Doing something completely off that you have not even thought now and is an investment in the future is also an innovation. So typically, we move from incremental to repeatable to custom, right? Because this is when you learn all of those. You learn the fact that when you do incremental, outcomes are uncertain. There is fear. There's a different way to measure innovation. There's no product that comes from an idea. So how do you measure creative people? You learn all of that when you do this incremental step. So I have found this model very useful. Even when I start new innovation teams, when I start teams that actually have to solve a problem, I actually have them go through this and spend maybe a month or so coming up with something that they want to do. It seeds in them the desire. And then you take a set of problems you have and give it to them. That becomes a day-to-day. And then over a period of time, these people will become creative enough that you can actually use them to solve, take their help, take their guidance, use their mental power to solve things that are completely new, right? It's the 5% in the barbell chart. You put that investment so that the payoff is really big. And they also know that they are not measured by what they produce, but the strength of their ideas and strength of these new pieces that they come in, right? So it also is in some ways is a interesting learning and training experience for people to graduate from. So having said that, how do we create innovation culture in organizations? It's really simple, actually very simple. We try to complicate it. It's really simple if you look at how we create innovation cultures, right? Be willing to admit that failure happens. Innovation by definition is an experimentation. Now, if you knew what the result is going to be, why do you call it an experiment? It's not an experiment anymore, right? So embrace the fact that innovation is experimentation. But when you fail, you learn. And learning actually helps you predict better. So for example, if you were trying to solve the problem of scale and you put 40 machines and you got 10 units of 10 times more performance, you put 80 machines, you probably won't get 20 times more performance. You'll only get 13 times or 14 times more performance. That's a learning, right? So you take back and say, my scale is not always 2x. The problem I have when I go from 10 machines to 40 machines is different than the problems when I have when I go from 40 machines to 100 machines. And even different when I go from 100 to 1,000. But instead of doing the 100 to 1,000 first, you do 1 to 10 to 40 and learn, 40 to 100 and learn and say, you know what, I know I'm aware. I can predict better. Right? I know that if I increase 40 machines to 100 machines, I'm not going to get 2x the performance that I got when I raised it from 20 to 40, for example, right? So the key takeaway is that when you inculcate an innovation culture, create an opportunity for learning. So I want to be cautious here, right? When I say learning, I'm not saying spend the rest of your time only learning. That learning should help you predict better outcomes. So for example, if you go to your manager or your professor and say, the rest of the 4 years, madam, I'm only going to spend learning. Yeah, but that's not going to help, right? So either you learn and produce something, either you learn and create value for the institution, either you learn and come up with some idea that can be used to change the way we teach. But hopefully, by stepping into enough of these little pieces at a time, you will learn enough to make sure you do the right things. In other words, learnings should help you predict better. So you can't say I'm innovating and then come up with ideas that those ideas go nowhere, right? I mean, if all of us had infinite time and money, we could do that. Remember that chart where we put time? If all of us had infinite time, nothing is a problem, right? The problem always is that we have resources, time constraints, and we try to balance all of those. And don't make learning judgmental. All right, learning has to be specific. It has to be database decisions, because that's when you can reuse it. You can use it to make better predictions. You can use it to say, hey, I did this last time. Here is the data that I collected, and I think it's wrong, or I learned something from this. I'm going to do something very different. If you leave learning to judgment, you will make the same judgment errors the next time. So I want to distinguish this, right? So very often we tend to get into this notion sometimes when we try to do innovation. Oh, I'm generating ideas, I'm good. No. Ideas have to be executable. If it has to be executable, there has to be an ability for us to take something and then make a product, make an idea, make a design, make something out of it. And you can increase your chances of something fruitful coming out of it if you can predict. And to predict, you learn. So I hope people can see that relationship, right? So in other words, as you learn, you become very disciplined about your experimentation. You tend to put your resources, because we are time constrained, because we are money constrained, you put your effort in a very disciplined manner to do experimentation, which is discipline, which means your results tend to become a little bit more predictable, which is really what you want, right? As a researcher, if you spend a lot of time trying to do a few things, you will learn enough each time you do some things that your end result will actually be very, very predictable. So please take this, please carry this in your mind. Innovation culture can be seeded in any organization, any college, any individual, you can do innovative things to your home, if only you are willing to do all of this, right? That understand you will fail, learn from it, use those to better calibrate, better predict what will happen when you do something similar next time, and bingo, right? We have started innovating. So what does this mean then? Shift focus from ideas to focus on execution. It's very important. Innovation, problem solving doesn't happen without innovation. All of us mistakenly think innovation is ideas. Innovation is not ideas. Innovation is actually doing it. Creativity is ideas, and ideation is a combination of these two, right? Something that actually works. In your own mind, whether it's an individual, if I have to do something new, break away from what you're doing today. That's important. That is innovation. Decide what's the right model, and then obviously discipline learning. Be willing to be a student when you innovate. It doesn't matter what age. You can be 70 and innovate. As long as you are willing to get in your head the fact that experimentation by definition will fail. Experimentation by definition has an uncertain outcome. So I'm going to learn. I'm going to be a student. I'm going to become 16 again. Right? So it's to a large extent, innovation is a mindset problem. It's our ability to be able to grapple with the unknown, to have less fear of what is unknown, and just walk in. Right, so let me share a couple of examples before I open it up for questions, just to give you a little bit of a context. So when I was working in Amazon before I joined Yahoo, we had a very interesting problem of solving the search problem. We were paying a huge amount of money to Google, and Google search engine was expensive, but we were using only 1% of its features. So one of the things that we did was started a new team called A9 team, which by the way started simultaneously in Bangalore and in the US around 2003. And the charter of the team was to come up with a search engine algorithm that we can use just to search books in Amazon. Right? If you look at where that's a repeatable process, right? So we had a defined problem. We said we need to solve the problem of search, and then we made it a day-to-day thing. So a few of us actually worked on that problem to come up with what. If I'm sure all of you shop in Amazon, so if you look at the website below, you'll see one line even today that says "powered by A9," right? That A9 is actually Amazon's original search engine that we wrote to replace the huge amount of money we were paying to Google to use very little features that we need. All we needed to do was search for books, and we were paying exorbitant amount of money. When I joined Yahoo, we had a similar problem of scale, and I talked to you a little bit earlier about it. Right? We were running, so all of Yahoo's front page was powered by close to 80,000 machines. It's not a simple problem to solve, so we had to go out of the way. That was an example of custom, the third model, where we had to do something completely different, right? Move away from the existing paradigms, break away completely from the old. But then what I had done in Amazon came in very handy for me, because I had learned a lot of lessons by doing the repeatable model, which was a smaller problem with a little bit more predictable outcome, but had elements of unpredictability in it, which I carried over when I went to Yahoo to write Hadoop, because it was completely unknown. We did not know where we were going. We did not even know whether we will succeed, right? So let me leave you with that, and hopefully you benefited. There are some takeaways. I'm happy to take any questions that people have. Happy to be challenged. I'm sure all of you in your innovation journey know things maybe more than I do, or very differently than I do, and I'm here not just to answer questions but also to learn. So thank you again. Thank you for being patient as I walk through this. Back to you, Dr. Sudha.
Thank you, sir. Now that we expect students to give your questions, prior to that, I have a question, sir. So in between, like I heard you telling experimentation is inefficient. What exactly did you mean by that, sir?
Oh, so no, I didn't. If I use that word, that's incorrect. Experiment is not inefficient, right? Experimentation is prone to unpredictability. So if you believe that predictability is important part of experimentation, then you have killed the goose before it laid the egg, right? And that's what we don't want to do. So how does something become inefficient? So for example, let me give you an example. Let's say I wash 5 clothes in 1 hour. And let's say you wash 10 clothes in 1 hour. You are actually more efficient than I am, right? In terms of getting things done. The problem is when we define something as efficient or inefficient, it's very relative. We tend to think of if somebody has to meet a certain set of parameters, that's when they are efficient. So unless I wash 10 clothes every hour, I'm not efficient. I'm saying don't get into that mentality. That's all I'm saying.
So I have one more.
Okay. No, did it answer your question or?
Yes, you are. Now I'm talking about the problem what you had in your core problem of scaling. You from 600 million users to 900 million users. If there is a shift like this, incredible number of users, you will have to do the process of scaling. To do that, you might have gone in for umpteen number of ideas, innovative ideas. So out of these, on what basis do you pick up an idea and go for an implementation?
Well, it's a good question. It's an O(n) squared problem, right? There's no easy answer. So there are a couple of yardsticks that I use. One is, as I was mentioning to all of you, there is really no way. So I don't believe in break the rules, right? You will see a lot of books that say break the rules. If you have to be innovative, throw away the old way and do something completely new. So first of all, I don't believe in it because, as I said, the money that I get to innovate comes from the money that I produce today, right? So profitability is important. When I say profitability is important, I mean doing existing things are important for the company to do. So for me, the challenge right now is how do I keep the existing systems running without any performance degradation? And then do the next big thing, which is get to 900 billion users in the next year. So the way we go about doing this, so once this is clear in your head, right? So I'm not going to discard what I'm doing now, but I'm going to invest on doing something that will build over what I'm doing without letting go what I'm doing today, even though what I'm doing today may be inefficient. And I can't say stop doing this because I need this money in order to fund my innovation. So whenever I decide what needs to be picked up, of course, there'll be lots of ideas, and all I do is pick ideas, right? I don't generate ideas. So all the bright people pick the ideas, and my job is to pick the right idea, which is a much easier problem. It's a ON problem. It's not an N squared problem. Maybe even not even an ON problem. It's a very linear problem. Back to your question, how do we pick? We have certain measurements, right? We say, for example, if 600 billion users, these are the hardware. This is the hardware stack that we use. Do we have to continue using this hardware? Do we have to invest? So a good example of that would be if you take hardware as one of the parameters, one of the levers for you to get to 900 million, the important decision to make is, are we moving to the cloud? Do we have to? So today LinkedIn uses all native machines, right? We have close to 30,000 machines that we own, and we run our systems on that. Is it needed? Can we go to cloud? Because cloud by definition provides a lot of scaling. At the very least, you can scale quickly, right? You can add more machines without having to buy those machines, put them into your network. Right? So that's one step I would do. So if I didn't have the time luxury and I have to move to a system that is very scalable, you need to think about, hey, can we actually move to the cloud? So we will start writing systems that allow us to move to an environment that doesn't constrain us by the physical limit. Right? That's what cloud provides. It gives us, in theory, a lot of opportunity to expand at will. That's not fully true, but I hope you get the point, right? It's not infinite, but it's a lot more infinite compared to the resources we have today within LinkedIn. The next decision point would be, when I move to the cloud, what are some of the things that I have to change? For example, today, when we don't use a machine, we still pay for it. When we go to the cloud, we actually pay only when we use the machine. So our metrics, remember I talked about what are the measures. The second limitation to it being innovative is we tend to take what we have been doing today and try to put it into the new innovation paradigm. No. Today we measure the machine cost by the number of, by 24, the cost of the machine is 2,400 rupees. So we simply say we are using the machine all 24 hours. Each machine costs 100 rupees every hour, right? Very simple mathematics. That's not true in a cloud environment. The metric will change. However, we will only be using the machine for X amount of time. Therefore, the cost to us will be the amount of time that we used. Therefore, all other factors come into play, which is, can I use it when the machine is least expensive? Can I use the machine can I ask Amazon to give me a machine when nobody else is using that machine, which means I can get it for a very cheap cost. So your ability to be able to look at how are we going to measure things also come into play. And unless you clear some of these important areas in your head, you will tend to use a what I would call a square peg into a round hole, right? Because you have been using a round hole for a while, and then you continue to use you were using a square peg in a square hole. The hole has now become round, but you're not changing your peg. So what I would recommend is, when you make certain big leaps, which goes back to our third model, right, which is the custom model, where we have a big problem to solve and we focus our energy very dedicatedly to solving the problem. The way we do it is we actually attack the three problems of innovation, which is, are you afraid? Are you measuring this right? Right? If you solve these two, then the third step becomes easy, which is, can I go and get it done? Right? And then when you say, can I go and get it done? Obviously, you will take a few ideas. You will pick one that you think you can implement. And then we have all heard of these interesting concepts, right? I will do a POC. I will test if something works. And that's what we call experimentation. So we take an idea, we try and see if this is actually doable. We will take an idea, for example, can we change the billing model from 24,000 rupees divided by 2,400 rupees per hour per machine to, hey, can we use change our applications to only bill when application actually runs on the machine, right? So that the logs that we collect to do the chargeback, all of that will change. And then so we'll run a quick experiment to see if this is doable. So when you take big pieces, you do two things. One, You change the frame of reference, you break away from the old, you come up with a new matrix, you break the problem to incremental steps, and then run a few experiments to make sure those incremental steps give you the value, and then try to put this together in order to solve the bigger problem. So there's no easy answer. As I said, there's no prescription for innovation. What I've attempted to do is just give you some framework, some meta prescription that you can use, and then decide about how best to divide. Big innovation problems are always divide and conquer. Right? You can never get to solving a 600 to 900 in one shot. You will solve 600 to something, 600 that something to something to something, then to 900. Right? So that's what I also emphasize on learning. Each time you do something that you learn quite a lot, and then go back because you've done it with the data, and it's not any guesswork, and it's not intuition, and it's not, hey, I think this is right, or I think this is what I learned. You substantiate it by data, it becomes very repeatable. So at some point, your ability to be able to make those leaps happen. You take this in any innovation. So let's say you have 1 year to come up with a new product. The first 6 months, actually nothing happens because you're experimenting, you're learning. But in the last 6 months will be very powerful. There'll be so many things that get done in the last 6 months. Right? This is like all of us preparing for the exam. How many of us prepare for the semester exam 6 months before the semester? No way. We do it a month before the exam, right? So we are wired to do that. So that's really how we solve this problem. We understand what innovation means. We understand the limitations of innovation. We understand what causes innovation to fail, and simply address those failure points.
Thank you, sir. Participants, if you have any questions, I think you can unmute your mic and question, or you can come up in the chat box, please.
Oh, sorry, can you repeat the question? The chat box went away before I saw it.
So it is, innovations in problem solving are my own ideas. Which one can I select as a student preference?
I'm not following the innovation in problem solving or my own ideas. Whoever wrote that, can you please explain? I don't want to come up.
Can anybody explain this, please? You can unmute your mic and please talk.
Yeah.
Or probably, sir, they've given two choices. One is like innovation of doing something, or their own traditional ideas. Which one select as a student? Which shall I prefer?
Yeah, so the disconnect I'm having in this is innovation is not one or the other, right? So innovation is not coming up with ideas only. So coming up with ideas is the creative part of the entire ideation process. Something becomes meaningful. So innovation actually happens only when you have an idea and get it to completion, which is what we talked about execution, right? We need to get things done. So I see the first line not as an or, but as an and. You have a problem, that's where you begin, right? So again, go back to the model. The model, there are three models. There is no problem, you just work on something random. That's how you begin. You see the innovation culture, right? And Google does that 20% of the time do it. Yahoo used to do it, right? Take 5%, 10% of your time and do whatever you want. So innovation, so you define, typically, in order for organizations to be able to innovate, there have to be a certain set of challenges you're trying to solve, right? So the incremental model is a good model to start, but it's not a huge payoff model. So innovation has to begin with a set of problems you're trying to solve. And it can be very simple. You can simply say, I want the next version of the laptop. I want the next version of my iPhone. Those are problems, right? So you define something and then you put your energy to solving that. Now, when you define a problem, there are two steps you take. One, come up with ideas about how to solve the problem, which is what we call creativity, which is the ideation, the design thinking, and all of that. But then that still doesn't make a product. That still doesn't produce anything that is tangible. So when people simply say innovation is generating ideas, it's completely wrong. Innovation is generating ideas, divergent. Taking those ideas, converging on one idea, two ideas: experimenting, trying to find out if it will work, and coming up with a product that actually works. So as a student, I think your goal should not be to say, I will only come up with ideas. As a student, your goal should be, hey, I'm going to come up with ideas, and actually 10 ideas I will come up with, 2 ideas I will pick up and actually do something about it. So when you write a paper, for example, you do that, right? You have a lot of ideas, you run experiments, you run tests, you do some form of validation, you produce some results, you publish those results, and then postulate a new a theorem or theory or a new method of doing something or a new way of solving a problem. But when somebody has to believe you, you actually should have done some work in order for me to believe your paper, right? So please don't see ideation as having an idea and doing nothing about it. Ideation, getting things done, is so solving a problem is 2-step: coming up with ideas, doing something about picking that idea and actually really solving the problem. So if you go back to the first slide, it said problem is complete only when something has been done about solving it, right? If I have to invent a wristwatch that tells me how to measure heart rate, there are lots of ideas you can put, right? Come up with a sensor that measures the pressure on your veins. Come up with a sensor that measures the pressure on your chest and then transmits it to the watch. All of these are ideas. But if you tell me, hey, these are ideas, I am still not, as a consumer, happy about the idea. That idea is good, but I want a watch. I want a watch that if I tie in my wrist will tell me my heart rate. So now you take these ideas. So either you can say, put a sensor or put something in your shirt that will measure the measurement and then send it to the watch so that you can turn your watch and see, or come up with a device that can actually measure the pressure in the veins in your wrist where you tie the watch and give you the data. Right? So I'm just taking 2 random ideas. So implement one of those ideas and then come to me and say, here is the product. That's really when you have what I would call complete you haven't solved the problem unless you have actually done something to solve the problem. And the done part only happens when you innovate. Right? So don't look at them as disjoint. That's my only recommendation.
So now I have a question. Which one you call as an innovative idea? In the sense, what I'm trying to ask you is, one of my decision would be called as a good decision only if I produce results. So my innovative idea...
Sorry, I lost you. One is a good decision and another is a...
No, my decision, any decision whichever crucial if I take, people would say my decision is good or bad only depending upon the results. If my decision gives good results, they say that is a wonderful idea. In case if it is going wrong, people would say, how would you take such steps? So that applies even to innovative ideas. Now, innovative ideas, like we have a lot of ideas, as you said, we need to execute it. We need to get results. The results need to encourage us, and then again we go with that cycle. So in case I have some innovative ideas which does not give me expected results, as you said, uncertain outcomes, which parameter would encourage me to go for further innovative ideas if I'm not able to produce results with few of my ideas?
So let me actually go back to what I'm not able to see the presentation, but so in one place.
Sir, we are getting your slides.
Okay, so you look at this waste disposal game, innovation execution, waste disposal game.
Yeah.
Innovation is actually that, right? So you're absolutely right. It's quite possible that for a long time, none of what you're doing may actually yield the results that you want. It's quite possible. We all have to approach innovation as a problem of disposing waste. Because out of the 100 experiments you run, only one experiment will actually be of value to you. That's perfectly okay. That's the price we pay for doing new things, right? Now, to your question, so once we get this in our heads clearly that innovation is a waste disposal problem and it is not a very fixed, time-bound, predictable outcome problem, right? So predictable outcome problem is operations. We run it on a daily. My production system has to be up. The college has to open every day at 9 o'clock. I mean, there's a process that we follow, and though it's become very predictable. Innovation, by definition, doesn't follow the process, and therefore is not predictable, and therefore is prone to failure. If your question is, what do I do in order to make outcomes successful? The only way is you begin by taking a few ideas, experiment on one idea. Oh, this is not really what I want, because every experiment will give you a result. The question is whether that result is meaningful to you or not. So this goes back to the way we solve the scale problem, right? You don't grab the elephant all at once. You grab one leg, you grab the next leg, you grab the third leg, you grab the fourth leg, and pretend that you have grabbed the entire elephant. Right? That's really what you should do. So there is no way we should try to solve some of these big problems all in one shot. And that's why custom innovation, when we talk about Model 3, custom innovation really talks about having a big problem that's broken down into very measurable steps. Remember, we talked about learning, we talked about predictable outcomes. That's really what you should do. So you will definitely fail when you're trying to do something new. And that's it. That's why we have R&D, right? R&D really means that this is research and development. Research, develop. So as long as you're not afraid of failing, as long as you have very clear ways of learning that you can use in order to refine your predictions better and come up with the right predictions next time, there is progress. So I wouldn't look at it again as, will I abandon something if I don't get the required results? As long as you look at innovation as a waste disposal problem and understand that you will have to abandon some approaches, you're good to go. You're good to move forward. The larger question to ask is, am I learning something from what field?
Okay.
If the answer to that is no, then we have a problem.
Okay. Participants, any questions? You can unmute your mic if you have any.
So, Dr. The audience is staff and students of...
Sir, it's a combination of both, sir. We have more students with few staffs.
Okay.
In the Meet link, we have around 83 students who have joined as of now. And we have few set of students and staffs in the YouTube link too.
Okay.
Participants, we are waiting for your questions. You can put it in the chat box or please unmute your mic. Sir, I don't find any questions coming up. I think they should be pondering over their own questions.
That's fine. So, but I hope people found this useful.
Definitely, sir. I thank you very much, sir. There is one question which has come up, sir. How to approach innovation as a societal responsibility?
How to approach innovation as a societal responsibility. When you say societal responsibility, are you talking about doing something for the community? Are you talking about... can you elaborate what you mean by social responsibility?
Sir, can I interpret, sir? I am faculty.
Yeah, please,
Yeah,
madam.
please.
So we are being used to apply for financial assistance schemes through various medias available. But when we are trying to approach for it, we are yet to that is analyze how we have to create the ideas and how we have to approach. That is more of the financial assistance schemes require societal responsibility to be included in it. So how come we could develop? You have clearly explained all through this 1 hour about the innovation process. How could we include the societal responsibility factor to it? That's my question.
Yes, so if I understand this right,
Thank you, sir.
Sure. If I understand this right, you're talking about what are some of the mechanisms I should use in order to have innovations in the society, right?
Sure, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So again, I would go back to the way we frame the problem, right? So the way we framed innovation as a process. Now, all societies have lots of problems that we have to solve, right? And let's pick an example. Let's say in your society there are a group of very bright students for whom you have to create a fund so that they can study. Right? In other words, their economic hardship shouldn't come in the way of their achieving what they want to. Let's assume that's the problem. Now, the first step in achieving something at a society level is to identify what are some of the problems that you will want to work on. Right? Most societal responsibility problems would fall in the custom category. They would not fall in 20% of your time do what you want category, or they would not even fall in the second category, which is very repeatable, right? Because you have to really come up with. So let's take this example. What's the problem we are trying to solve here? The problem that we are trying to solve is there are a bunch of very bright students in your village who don't have the financial wherewithal, but they're extremely bright, and you want to create an opportunity for them to be able to pursue their studies and create the funds for that, right? So first of all, find out in which bucket you have to put this, because this requires a lot of energy. So now what do you have to do? You have to create an awareness, maybe within the society itself first, and ask if people will contribute. There may be some rich people in the society who may find meaning in what you're doing and contribute. That may or may not be enough. You may have to go to some organizations and say, I have done this, I have raised 10% of the money that I need from my village, from my society. I need 90% more funding. How much can you give? You may get another 20-30%. Then you go to some wealthy individuals outside your village. You may write to the Ambanis, you may write to the Narayan Murthis and say, I'm engaging in this organization. Can your trust in this endeavor, can your trust give me an opportunity? Can your trust give me X amount of rupees to fund this? So that's part one of the problem, right? So define the problem and then come up with ideas, which is what we call creativity, to solve the problem. So first step is ideas. I can raise some money from the village. If I go to any individual and say, give me money, they're not going to. But if I raise money from the village, they will know I've put some work. I've raised 10% of the money. Now I want more money and I'm going to them. I will also tell them how I intend to spend the money. I will tell them how open I will be about where the money is spent. So there's a lot of steps that you will cover. These are called incremental steps, right? You will learn them. You will do the first. So when you go to the wealthy individuals in your village and ask for money, some will give, some will not. People who don't give will give you some. Here is why I'm not giving, and that's a learning. So you go back and say, oh, no, that's a good point. I didn't think about it. One person raised the question of what if I don't use this money for, how do I solve that? So you come up with a process or steps that says, you innovate and say, every time I spend the money, here is what I will do. I'm going to be able to put this money into another trust, which 5 people will sign. Therefore, I will not have the check signing. I'm simplifying things here, but you get the point. So you don't. The way you define it is you define the problem. The way you solve it is you define the problem. Then you find out what model you have to approach, you have to adopt. And once you do that, you then start executing, as we said, in incremental pieces. Right. So first you may say, I will go to one group of people to get the money. Then I will go to the next set of wealthy individuals to get the money. Then I will advertise in the paper and solicit funds. Then I will actually, again, I'm taking a random example, but just bear with me. I'm going to write to the PM to get some amount of money every year from the PM Relief Fund for putting for this cause. And what are some of the things I have to do in order to convince Modi that he needs to give me the money, right? So these are all the steps that you will take. And every one of these is in some sense is an innovative process because it has not been done before. Nobody in your village has been able to go beyond undergraduate degree to study. So you are creating what I call, what we would normally think of as a very, very not normal process, right? You're moving away from what we have been used to doing so far. Everybody in the village studies up to bachelor's degree, goes for a job. Now you're saying, no, there are some bright people. We can get a lot more value if they study, and then they can probably change the world. So I'm going to do my part to create an opportunity for them to study higher, right? So you're breaking away from what is normal, and you should realize that. So when you break away from something normal, you have to have a very different way by which you will go about doing it, right? Because one, you don't know what to do. That means you will do some things and fail. That means you will have to learn from those failures and keep tuning. So remember that chart, right? Every time you fail, you learn about how you can make outcome more predictable. So let's say you go to another wealthy individual the second time. you will tell all of the things that the individual wants to hear so that they can give the money, right? So for example, you will say, here is how I'll collect the money, here is how I'll document it, here is what I will do. Because the first person told you, no, I'm not at all convinced that you'll spend this money wisely, so I'm not giving you. But if you just take that and drop it, it's waste. But if you take that and say, oh, these are the concerns. Let me either go back to the same person, or when I go to the next person, let me say this even before they ask. So you have learned something, you have invested in that incremental learning. You are in some sense predicting much more accurately the questions people will have because you've been asked those questions and you have data, you got the answers, you go to the next person and say, sir, madam, I really understand these are the questions you have in your mind. Here is what I'm going to do, right? So that following a certain set of what I would call very simple principles will help us innovate faster. And this also goes back to what Dr. Sudha asked, right? I mean, you have to be willing to admit failure. You will have to go, you will for sure go to a few people who are wealthy as hell, but will not give you a single rupee. That's okay. That's part of the process, right? You're not going to be defeated by it and say, where am I going to collect the money if these wealthy individuals don't even see what I'm trying to do? That will happen. Innovation by definition will cause failures because you're charting new territory, you're having new metrics, you have done something that nobody has done before, right? So I don't know if I answered your question fully, but what I would say is that societal responsibility on doing something innovative there is no different than any innovation you would do in your personal life, in your college life, in your work life, right? It's just that you have to embrace certain characteristics of what innovation entails. You have to try out many things. You have to learn from failure. You have to be able to predict better the next time when you do something in the path towards getting the problem solved. Right? So if you follow these steps, I would not classify innovation as belonging to a certain segment. It's a universal problem for anything that you want to innovate.
Thank you very much, sir. You have given various avenues on how we have to approach. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
As you have rightly said, it is a universal problem. Innovation happens on a second-to-second basis in all walks of life. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. I don't think any questions are coming up here.
All right. So thank you so much.
Deepa, you have Deepa, and then
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon to all. As all good things in life comes to an end, so is this webinar. On behalf of Hindustan College of Engineering and Technology, I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to this webinar on problem solving and ideation workshop organized by our Hindustan School of Computer Applications. At the outset, I thank our chief guest and resource person, Mr. K. Chidambaran, Head Analytics Platform and Application, LinkedIn, Bangalore. We are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence. Thank you, sir. We are thankful to our principal, Dr. K. Karnakaran, our beloved HOD ma'am, and staff members for their constant support. Our heartfelt thanks to our students, friends for their active participation. With these warm words and a kind message, we move to the end of today's webinar. Thank you.
thank you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
And kindly fill the feedback form.
Participants,
All right. Thank you, Doctor. Can I leave the call now?
Sir,
yes, sir.
a small information. We request all the participants to open their video for a snapshot. Participants, please open up your video for a snapshot. Sir, can you please?
Yes, sir. Is
My video is
video
always
is
on.
on. Yes, the video is on.
Sir, you can please stop your presentation, sir.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Nice to see you after a very long time, sir. I believe
Yes,
it should be more than 9 years.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I think I came once when I was in Yahoo, right? Long back.
Yes, sir.
2011 or 12.
2014, if I'm not wrong. 13, 14.
So still waiting for the picture or are we done?
Yeah, and if you have muted their video.
Okay, so sorry, I couldn't hear you properly. Is the picture done?
It's just 2 minutes. Yes, sir. It's done.
Okay, great. So I can drop off
Yes,
then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you, sir.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye, everyone.
ஆயிடுச்சு ஆனா எனக்கு நிறைய ஆன் பண்ணல